The India story at the World Economic Forum in Davos has always been an extremely positive story for the last several years. Certainly, India has been an outlier to global growth. The expectations of the Indian economy doing really, really well is something which is certainly a matter of conversation, not only at the World Economic Forum, but also on the sidelines. The India promenade this time around is a mini India as always. But what are India's expectations of Davos? That's what we're looking at in this very special session with the Confederation of Indian Industry. I'd like to introduce my panelists, Mr. R. Dinesh. Thanks very much for being with us. President CII, Chairperson of TVS Supply Chain Solutions, Rajiv Memani on my left. Vice President of CII and Chair India Region and Chairman Emerging Markets Committee ENY, and Mr. Chandrajit Banerjee, familiar face, Director General of the Confederation of Indian Industry. Let me come to you first, Mr. Dinesh. In as much as there are wonderful themes that the WEF is looking at, whether it's artificial intelligence or sustainable growth, there is a sense that of concern, isn't there? There are wars which are taking place, a potential expansion of this conflict. There's a situation in the Red Sea. Do you believe that this is one of the big themes this time around?
I think if you look at it, one of the themes which WEF itself has chosen is rebuilding trust.
Right.
And I think that reflects on the geopolitical situation, which, I mean, started maybe with one, and then you had two, and then you have three. So if you look at it from India's context and from Indian industry context, I think these are obviously things which we continue to watch out for, because they do have an impact. Now we are in the integrated global economy. But having said that, I think it also places, I would call it, an extra responsibility on India to be that partner who actually lives up to and secures that trust, both from a commercial point of view and both from the way in which both strategically and geopolitically we deal with certain issues.
Yeah.
So as far as from Indian industry and CII is concerned, I think the core focus is to be able to make sure that we continue to be, I would call it, be globally integrated, but at the same time be the preferred partner when it comes to the trust in the relationship.
Right. You know, India is an outlier, Mr. Memani, to what we are seeing. The WEF is saying that globally 2.9% is all that they're looking at in terms of global growth. Could you share with us the optimism that you sort of sense in the World Economic Forum, people you're talking to, the fact that there is such huge India representation here?
Yeah, I mean, it's early to say. We've just started meeting a few people. But in whatever meetings that we've had, and as a preparation to this, for the meetings that have been set up, I think the India story really stands out. One is obviously the numbers and the which is there, but I think there are two or three things that are equally important. The first, I think, is how government has now clearly laid down policy frameworks. Earlier, which were impediments, but policy frameworks for almost each of the sectors. And the strategy is very clear, where India wants to go on AI, on data, on green energy, on sustainability. I think that piece is very clear. So I think the more we can communicate that, and I think as people get a better sense of that, that is very important. The second is the resilience in the economy, whether it's the macroeconomic fundamentals, you look at the tax revenue collections that have happened, you look at the GDP growth. I think consistently every statistic that was laid out for the growth, I think we've outperformed that. So overall, the growth, the future potential, and the policy platform that's being laid out, I think that's been very positive. The resilience part is very positive. And in some areas, especially like green energy and sustainability, the amount of investments that is coming, almost $300 billion plus of investments, a lot of the driven by Indian businesses, Indian public sector companies, but in a way capital coming and some of the technology coming from around the world. So how that story is articulated, and a lot of the Indian seminar sessions, including what CII is doing, a few of them, is about green energy transition, green energy. And the second thing, if you walk around the promenade, it's AI everywhere.
It is, yeah.
The AI house that's got created. So there's a lot of excitement around AI and how government and policymakers react to that.
You know, Mr. Banerjee, you've been here for years and years. This has become a mini India, this promenade. Does that really translate into business or investment in India and states? I ask this because, for example, there are 3 states over here, Telangana, Maharashtra, and Tamil Nadu as well. And investment in India, how much does Davos attract investment?
Davos, well, it's in a couple of parts. You see, number one, as what Rajiv and Dinesh were mentioning, we talk about the progress every year as to what we have done from what we were last year. That's one. Second, if you see in the promenade, you talked about India, but you also see some Indian companies featuring very strongly, specific companies, and some of them, you see the number of companies also in the promenade from India are growing. So obviously they are being able to have global connects. The third part is states over here obviously are here to attract more investments and to talk about the next story of India is really in the states of India. And if you really see how the states are reforming, the states are attracting investments, how the states are being able to invest on infrastructure, what type of opportunities the states give for participation of the globe into its story of development, be it in infrastructure and beyond. That itself attracts a lot of investment. And also we see many of the good stories of the states in terms of when we look at a subject like AI or really education, say for instance, how it is also partnered with the globe. And many of it has come from their interface, their deliberations in Davos. So I think the entire India story, if it has got to be seen, it's got to be seen in three parts. One is the overall India, which is a phenomenal, magnificent story that we have been able to curate over the last few years to say what the type of progress India has made on many of the sectors just talked about. The second is to how that has percolated down to the states, and the states have really taken it on. And the third, the Indian companies who itself are being able to get connected very strongly. I think these three pieces are moving brilliantly in the promenade.
Let's talk a little bit, Mr. Dinesh, about artificial intelligence and employment generation. There are lots of worries saying employment generation, jobs are going to go. What are you generating? What's the response to that?
No, I think it's, I would call it the reverse way of looking at it would be what kind of new jobs is artificial intelligence going to generate? And if you look at, I think there is I would call it the digital, I would call it leadership, which India has established, actually leads us to use AI in a more smarter and a better manner to make businesses, I would call it more focused on delivering the right value and the right solutions. That's A. B, that does again present a unique opportunity for India and Indian companies to take the lead in the way in which AI is used. And I think if you saw in the B20 outcome, we were speaking about how responsible AI is going to be in terms of delivering value. And I think, obviously there can be, for everything, there can be a negative. Yeah. But I think the positive way to look at it would be, how do we create value? How do we create a new set of skills, a new set of capabilities, where India can take the lead, like we have taken the lead in terms of the digital infrastructure and the digital data, which I think has thrown up different solutions for that. Yeah. And the last bit is, as we speak about the skill development and the ability for AI to be harnessed in a responsible manner, let us also not forget it applies both to private sector and to the government. And I think India has really stood out, or the Indian government has really stood out in terms of their ability to create what I would call as the public good in using each of these digital capabilities. So there in artificial intelligence also, I'm fairly confident that we will take the lead there.
Mr. Vimani, how do you look at it? You know, when we have conversations nowadays about AI, there's a lot of interest, but nobody really knows where it's headed. If we speak about it from, from economies or companies, if you were to look into if you were to crystal gaze into the future, how is it really going to impact all of us?
Yeah, it's very hard to say, but just adding to what Dinesh was saying, the overall, we did an analysis and in our view, in the next 8 to 9 years, the positive impact, if India, also a lot of these things depend on how a technology evolves. The incremental impact on the economy, if we were to adopt AI properly, could be in the range of $800 billion to $1 trillion. So the efficiency impact, the new services, the new opportunities that one can create are very, very significant. Now, having said that, it's an evolving technology. There are regulatory aspects of that which we discussed. But even when you try and execute it, when we did the survey, 60% of the Indian companies felt that AI will have a big impact on their business. Yeah. But 80% of them felt that they still don't know how to deal with it. There are issues around data privacy that they're worried about, because once they put something out, where does it travel? You need massive amount of data. If you want to run your own ALMs, you need massive amount of data that is there. the ability of building used cases, and also it's expensive because it consumes massive amount of energy. The intellectual property is with a few companies and they're pricing it. So how do you make used cases where the economic benefit is there? So those, and then obviously availability of skill talent and organizations. How do organizations reskill themselves, identify these use cases and then go ahead? So a lot of, we can see a lot of progress that Indian companies are going through, but it'll take time. It is not something, it has definitely captured the imagination. Most people know that it'll have an impact. How much, what's the time frame, and how do you do that in a nuanced way is how corporates are looking at. And the governments are also progressing in a very similar way.
Right, yeah. The other key theme over here is sustainable economic growth. We've set out what our goals are, what our challenges are, etc., etc. One of the biggest challenges, not only from an India standpoint, but globally, is bringing down the cost of key technologies, whether it's green hydrogen or the next generation of batteries. EVs, for example, are not for the common person. They're extremely expensive even now. What are your thoughts on this theme as far as India is concerned?
So we see, number one, we see Indian targets to be pretty much feasible. We are seeing good headway towards those targets. And when we talk about by 2030, see, we have been very practical in our approach. And if I would say we are looking at public transport, we are looking at, so when you talk about affordable transport, we see if you really look at EVs in terms of buses, the last mile connectivity, etc., we see that's coming up very fast. Second, even I would think that even if you really look at the automobile sector, there is pretty much of breakthroughs there to see how we are seeing more and more affordable sort of EVs coming up, and even if you look at two-wheelers. So it's something where we are moving faster than what our targets have been. And,
right.
And when we have a strong India sessions on green hydrogen that we are also working on over here. And we see the global sort of connectivity again, which we'll leverage in Davos when we really look at the entire space of green, the entire space of not just the future of mobility, but when we really look at the energy transition piece, when we are looking at even green, where India has done so very well in terms of our targets of net zeros of both the hard to abate sectors, some of them doing, even companies as well as sectors doing well. I think this entire piece of India is a strong story, and there is huge global opportunities, and we are over here to see how there can be much more global participation in India with the targets that we have, both for our cities as well as for the different pieces of green. And I think there is a wonderful example if you really go back on the pricing, if you look at the solar and the way we have been able to bring down the pricing. So the pricing itself is, would find its own place over a period of time. And I think this Davos, we will be able to take a lot back in terms of energy transition, green, and the entire space of it.
Just one or two more questions, Mr. Dinesh. How is green hydrogen going to play out for us going forward?
I think it's very early days for us to really come and comment saying this is how it will play. I think that's going to be one more alternative
to a couple of options. Right
exactly.
Now, yeah.
But I think I just want to add to what CB mentioned. If you really look at it, ultimately whatever is the solution we build, it has to make commercial sense. And I think let us not forget that India has a market which I think has both, I would call it the scale, the size and the need to be able to implement cost-effective solutions. So the example which CB mentioned of, bringing down the cost of power, or even for that matter, public transport utilization of the EV as an example. So even if I look at green hydrogen or any new technology which is going to create a more sustainable mobility solutions or generation of other power, or as the case may be, I think the focus has got to be on commercial logic. So in the case of green hydrogen, I think we know that production can be done. Storage and distribution is still a challenge which we'll have to resolve. So if I go down that journey, I think we will see what happens in the next 3 to 5 years. But the starting point for us is making sure that there is a commercially viable solution And that exists today in many of the sustainable solutions which India is building.
All right, but I'd like to thank you, gentlemen, very much for joining us today. You know, it is a key conversation on themes which really impact people across the world. The future of green, the future of sustainable development, artificial intelligence, where that's going, and of course the macroeconomic situation with trade and concerns when it comes to security in so many parts of the world.